And to talk a little bit more about what Samus could potentially add to this offense and where Washington could go in the draft, let's bring in Trevor Matich, played for the Burgundy and Gold. And well, when it comes to the draft, nobody breaks down the players any better than Trevor. Trev, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
It is great to see you, Julie.
It is. We worked together for many years at NBC Sports Washington. So glad we can continue this relationship. Look, the team goes out and takes a chance on a guy who has never played the game before, but seems to be a freak of an athlete. What do you make of Samus Reyes coming here and looking to make that next step?
Julie, I love it. I love the potential. Because of the basketball skills, he immediately should be both a red zone threat and a deep threat, because you throw the ball up. And who in the NFL, what safety, what corner, what linebacker for that matter, that could run with them, will be able to match him when it comes down to effectively rebounding a football as it comes down. I love that. And so he'll be a work in progress. But I think the coaching staff understands that. And I think they'll give him the chance to learn this game of football, because right now, I think in his mind, he's thinking about those long arms, those big hands, that ability to time a rebound. What he's not really thinking enough about, in my opinion, is how to get off the line. Because if they're on the 5-yard line, and they want to throw the ball up to him in the end zone, the defense isn't going to let him escape. And so the first thing he'll have to learn is not how to catch a football, not even how to run a route, but how to get off of the press, how to get off of the line of scrimmage when some big old linebacker is jamming him. And keep in mind that he doesn't have much time. He's got about a second, and then he's got to be into his route. So to me, that will be the first thing he needs to learn. But as long as he's able to get past that part, I am really fascinated by the potential for this guy.
You know, he is hungry, Trevor. He talked a lot about his upbringing, how he came here at 14 years old, $50 in his pocket. So he is up for the challenge. It might not be just until he gets those reps and that live action until we can see how it translates. But excited to follow this storyline for him. Look, he comes into a room where they added Curtis Samuel as a wide receiver. They added Adam Humphries as a slot guy. How do you see the offensive weapons stacking up as they currently stand?
Julie, I love how the pass catchers have come together even before we get to the draft. Because last year you had Logan Thomas, tight end, who was coming into his own but still inexperienced. And then Terry McLaurin, a wide receiver that nobody could cover. And after that, no receiver, no tight end gave defenses any concern in their game planning at all. Now all of a sudden you bring in Curtis Samuel, who is a fast guy. I mean, he's 4'4", and so that will take a whole lot of pressure off of Terry McLaurin. And McLaurin has been essentially unstoppable, almost unstoppable, even though defenses have been able to gang up on it. So adding Samuel is massive. Adding Adam Humphries in the slot is also massive. Now, he's been hurt over the last couple of years a lot. But if he's able to stay healthy, he's got the experience to exploit the underneath matchups when McLaurin and Samuel take the top off the defense, where the safeties have to keep deep. So all these things come together with the synergy that this team has not had in a long time. Because now, opposite McLaurin, you got more speed, more route running ability, and you've got with Humphries more ability to work underneath. So this to me is going to be exciting to watch.
And they may not be done. I mean, the draft is coming up. I don't know that many people have them taking a pass catcher at 19, but you never really know how things may fall, right? But either way, there are definitely opportunities for them to get somebody in the draft. Do you have some names that you think would fit well with Washington?
You know, Julie, this draft has a lot of players that should fall farther than their talent might allow because of certain things that have happened to them. And there's some receivers that are like that. One that really stands out to me is Rondale Moore out of Purdue. His freshman year, a few years ago, he single-handedly knocked Ohio State out of the playoff. But then the next 2 years, there was some combination of being injured and opting out that kept him from being able to fulfill his potential. And so if Washington believes that he's not injury prone, he's one of those guys that should fall. Another guy that should fall is De'Ami Brown. He is maybe the best deep threat of all the wide receivers not considered in the first round coming out of college football. Out of North Carolina, he got behind everybody, including Clemson. No one could keep him from getting behind him. I mean, he averaged for 3 years, 17 yards per catch, but he was not asked to run a whole lot of underneath routes. So he has a lot of work to do in the NFL. But because of that, he should drop farther in the draft than maybe he should. And they can line him up outside and send him deep to allow more space for McLaurin and Samuel and Humphries to work the medium to shorter routes. So these are the kinds of guys in the draft that I don't think there's a lot of attention being paid to, but that could come in and do one thing really well and enable other guys to do more.
Trevor, you're a stud. We're glad to have you here. Let me set you up for some linebacker talk. First off, look, this is a position group that Ron Rivera was a bit critical of last season. He wanted, granted, he played the position himself, right? So he has that right to be. But he wanted more out of him, wanted more downhill kind of performance from the guys, more speed, more aggression. So this is a position that many people think that they may target at 19th overall, or at least in the first round, depending if they decide to go up or back. Should they do that, what are some of the names that might be there for them?
There's a couple that I think are really intriguing, Julie. You're right. As a group last year, the linebackers were a liability. I mean, on tape, watching this group, you didn't just see them get beat in coverage a lot. You did see that. But you also saw them make assignment errors. You saw them bust contain, and all of a sudden a quarterback or running back will break free out on the edge and run for 20 yards before anybody's there to touch him. And when you go back and look at why that happened, it was a linebacker that decided to go inside where his buddy was instead of staying outside where he was supposed to be. So this has got to be exasperating for Ron Rivera. So I think at linebacker right now, speed, the ability to cover the field, range, is what they would want in the first round, really, anyway. And one of the guys I think that would fit perfectly is a kid out of Notre Dame named Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. You watch him on tape, Julie, and you see explosiveness everywhere. He's not the biggest guy, but he flies around. When he gets there, he separates the ball carrier from the ball. And the guy he reminds me of is Devin White of Tampa Bay. That's Owusu-Koramoah. And with a secondary that's improved, and with a defensive line that's already one of the best in the league, he would improve that middle layer of linebackers dramatically on day one.
Aside from him, because I know a lot of mock drafts that I've seen have Washington going exactly for Jeremiah, is a player out of Georgia. Tell us about this guy.
Yeah, this is Azeez Ojulari, and he is such an enigma. If you like him, take it at that spot if he's there. The thing is, I've seen him mocked as high as 11, and I've seen him mocked outside of the first round. Because the things that make him, the things that you can't coach, are the things that have him mocked high. He's extremely fast, he's fluid, he's explosive, he's got an outstanding first pass rush move off the edge. He can run and cover the field, that's good. But what you can coach, he needs a lot more coaching on. And those are the reasons why he might drop out of the first round. And one of those is that his first pass rush move was so good that the offensive linemen in the college football haven't been able to force him to go to the second move. So he doesn't really have that much of a counter off of that. He can develop it, but he hasn't shown it yet. Also, while at times it's so much fun to watch him slam into linemen and then slide off to make the tackle, other times he will stick on those blocks. He can't get off those blocks. So there's a bit of consistency there. So whether you like his potential because of his explosiveness that you just can't coach, or whether you're worried that he hasn't developed more secondary pass rush moves and he still is inconsistent getting off of blocks, will determine where you want him. And so if Washington thinks, look, he's fast, we can coach the rest of them, he will, like Owusu-Koramoah, upgrade the speed and explosiveness of that middle of the defense, the linebacking core.
You know, one of the things when talking about this linebacking core that we'd hear Jack Del Rio say is, look, it took them a little bit to learn the system. Next year it should be better, although they lost a few. Can you expect rookies at linebacker to come in and have an impact right away, or do they typically tend to be a little bit more developmental?
Well, there's a lot they need to know because they need to know coverage and the line of scrimmage. I mean, you bring in a defensive lineman. There's a lot for defensive linemen to know too, but one thing they don't need to worry about is who to cover and what the coverage is. So much they just go get the quarterback and they just stuff the run. But from a standpoint of linebacker, they're like tight ends. Tight ends need to know pass routes. They need to know coverage. They also need to know everything an offensive lineman knows about blocking. And so linebackers are like that. But when you've got a guy that can run, you can also simplify what you're asking him to do early so that he can just do a small subset of the playbook that he will eventually be able to learn.
Any names maybe a little bit later that could be coming up quickly?
You know, Julie, one of my favorite players in this draft is linebacker out of North Carolina, Chaz Surratt. He played quarterback until 2 years ago, 2019. But that year and then last year, he was maybe the most disruptive linebacker in college football, certainly one of the more disruptive linebackers because he would fly into gaps. He would fly at ball carriers, and he would appear out of nowhere and just throw his body in there. It was just amazing to watch. Absolutely no regard for his own personal safety. He stayed healthy doing it. So much fun to watch, but because he played quarterback up until 2 years ago, he's extraordinarily raw with his technique and with where to put his eyes and things like that. He won't be in the first round. But if you're willing to trust that you can teach him and give him a couple of years to get up to speed, he could be a special teams terror right off the bat. And he could give you some situational blitzing and things like that, and third down and nickel and stuff. But then you could bring him up to where he could be a starter in a couple of years, and you may end up with a steal in this draft in Chaz Surratt. He is so much fun to watch.
Trevor, we're going to talk about your specialty, the O-lineman coming up for the team and in the draft. You know this area well.
Yeah, Julie, and the thing is, it's been such a nightmare for so many years leading up to the last couple that it's kind of weird for me to hear myself say that the offensive line is in pretty good shape right now. Not great shape, but much better than it's been. In the past, they've had problems with talent in some cases, but injuries, I mean, epic injuries to where they had to sign multiple guys off the street, plug them in that week to start at offensive line. And this was a common occurrence for this team. But the last couple of years, things have kind of settled in. They've got some young guys that need to perform. But I think those guys have been around for a little while. Wes Martin, the left guard, is ready to take that next step, and they need him to. Jaron Christian at left tackle, it's about time he stays healthy and takes that next step. But he's got the potential to. And so right now, in terms of elite talent, there's a couple of guys, especially with right guard Brandon Sheriff, but they've got good competition at more positions than they've had in a long, long time.
And I know we're excited to kind of see what we may get out of Sadiq Charles, as his entire rookie season was predominantly down to injury. What he got in on two plays in one of the games before he went down again. So we'll see what he can offer as well. You got Morgan Moses, that even at times, though, you talk about the injuries, like this guy has played through a lot of them, but at times at the end of the season, we saw him moving over to left tackle. Not ideal, but he is getting up there. So we need some depth at offensive line, and that is going to be a position that they going into this draft will be targeting. The question coming, though, Trevor, is there going to be a lineman that this team would be able to get in the first round at 19?
There might be, Julie, just because so many quarterbacks will go before that, and so many receivers will go before that. And there are elite players at both of those positions that I think will push down position players farther into the range where Washington will draft. So there is a chance. I think a lot of people are trying to mock to Washington Christian Darrisaw, the left tackle out of Virginia Tech. And if he falls to Washington there, I wouldn't be upset if they took him and never looked back, because he has the fluidity, the strength, and the nastiness. I mean, the mean streak to be not just a tone setter on this team, but also a guy that can erase the elite pass rushers on the other side. But because of all that, I wonder if he'll be available at 19.
It's interesting. They say how nice of a guy he is, but you don't really want your offensive lineman to be that nice. I think nasty is a good word for that. Another player that has a little bit of that nasty streak, Elijah Vera Tucker. What do you make of him? Many are thinking he might go much earlier, though.
Yeah, and for all the reasons that I just mentioned about Darrisaw, I mean, he's position versatile. He had to play a lot of different places at USC, and he can play left tackle in this league. He would need a bit of polish. He'll need coaching and focus at that one spot, because he did move around quite a bit with the Trojans, but he could also play guard. But this is one of the reasons that I think he'll be gone. He could start at tackle. He could start at guard. And he could also be that valuable swing lineman that can give you quality reps at almost any position along the line while he's developing into a starter as a backup. But if he's available, he's another guy. If they take him, it wouldn't bother me at all. I wonder if he'll be there.
Yeah, I think that's the question. But if they decide to go a different direction and maybe go to the LBs, which we'll be talking about later on in the week in that first pick, what about later in the draft? What are some of the offensive linemen that might be there in those second, third, fourth rounds?
Julie, this is really intriguing to me, because there's some interesting players later in the draft, especially if you start at the second round. You look at a guy like Walker Little, left tackle out of Stanford. He, 3 years ago, was considered one of the up-and-coming tackles that would be a surefire first-round pick. But then 2 years ago, 2019, he got injured in the first game, didn't play, and then he opted out of last year because of COVID. And so he hasn't played a lot of football, but he's still with all that height, has got great feet. He's got long arms. And if you're willing to let him develop a little bit, make up for a lot of the play that he lost in college because of injury and opt-out, he's a guy that'll be available outside the first round. Another guy that might fall out of the first round is Jackson Carmen out of Clemson. Last year he played hurt, and so his tape is not very good. But he's got as much talent as pretty much any tackle in this draft in terms of just raw talent. He's just inconsistent right now. But if he falls out of that first round, especially if he falls out of the second or into the late second, he'd be another guy that you can get without investing that first round pick. And then there are a couple of guys that are just fascinating to me, interior guys. One of them is Kendrick Green out of Illinois. He plays center, but he could also play guard. Green is one of the most explosive linemen in college football. He fires out of his stance with explosiveness like you rarely see, and then he shocks defenders and pancakes them. He's one of the best in college football at that, but his pass protection is a work in progress. He's got the feet to be able to get better, but because of that, he's likely to fall farther than he should. It's one of those guys that if coaches think, hey, I can get this guy coached up, he's a guy that should be or could be a really interesting player with interior positional versatility that could bring not just a stopgap for injuries, but bring an attitude and the ability to road grade.
Let's talk a little bit about that secondary. Taking a look at the moves that they made, they lost Ronald Darby as they had him on a one-year prove-it deal. He proved it and he's moved on. But they did sign William Jackson III, and they also brought in Dale Roberts as a depth signing. What do you make of the adds to the secondary?
Love that. I think Jackson is an upgrade over Darby. Darby played really well, but I love William Jackson III, one of the best press man cover guys that was available in free agency. Now, there's some question about how he'll do in the zone, but many zones become man. They start zone, they end up man. So you play zone even in a man scheme sometimes. And I think that he'll be fantastic with this team. But it's Roberts that really interests me, Julie, because he's a guy that's played a lot of different positions, including a lot of free safety. He's very fast, another 4-4 guy. And I'm interested to see how they use him. Right now, I think on paper, people are thinking slot. But I wouldn't be surprised if they had him play slot and in the nickel and maybe move him back to free safety to get that extra range. Now you've got the cover skills of a corner, the speed of a corner, playing free safety. And that right there alone would be an upgrade in a lot of ways for Washington secondary.
You know, you mentioned free safety. That was a position that had a little bit of a rotation last year. But as we do move towards the draft, what positions and what names do you believe that they could target earlier than later?
I think earlier, there's one guy that would be a real consideration in the first round if he falls to number 19, and that's Trayvon Merrick out of TCU. Now, he's a safety, but he's another guy with cover skills and phenomenal ball skills. When the ball comes down, he's not one of those guys that knocks it away. He intercepts. He's really good. And receivers are accustomed to safeties not being nearly as good when it comes to fighting for the ball when it comes down, because the receiver practices that all the time. Safety's practicing all kinds of things. But Merrick is one of those guys that you could plug in as a rookie and start and have a big upgrade there. The only other safety that I really like, and he's really not a first-round guy, is Jamar Johnson out of Indiana. In a lot of ways, he's a lot like Merrick, except he's not quite as fast. But these are guys that you could plug in and really get at free safety. There's other guys that are available, but now you start to lose a lot as you get farther down the draft in this safety class. You lose speed in some guys. Some guys can run fast, but they're not very good at recognition. Some guys at safety are guys that can cover really well, but they're a little too small and they'll get pushed around by the types of tight ends that they'll have to cover sometimes. But those two guys, I think, are really interesting for the first two rounds.
It becomes a big balance between the strengths and weaknesses and how much you think you can coach them up. Chris Harris is known to be a pretty darn good secondary coach, but it sounds like he may have his work cut out for him bringing in a young guy into that secondary. So what about potentially later on in the draft? What are some of the names that might be around there and a good fit for Washington?
You know, there's one guy that I like, but I'm a little worried about, is out of the University of Washington, Elijah Molden. His father played in the league. He's a football character guy. He's the kind of guy that you want in your locker room. Consider Terry McLaurin or Ryan Kerrigan that you add. He can play corner. He can play safety. But he's a little small to play either, especially safety. And what you lose with him is a little bit of high-end speed. So you'd have to be careful to make sure that you don't put him in a position to have to cover too many fast guys deep. From a safety standpoint, you have to be careful that the opposing offense doesn't match him up on big tight ends or big receivers too much, because he's not the biggest guy in the world. So this is what happens in this secondary class, where the top guys, the top corners, really, really good. As you start to go down with corners and safeties, you start to compromise. And you can compromise at receiver. If you get a receiver that's really good at running the deep route, and that's all he can really do, well, you can put him in there and have him run the deep route, no big deal. But if you've got a corner or a safety that has a weakness, you can count on opposing offenses to isolate that weakness in ways that you don't have to worry about with the receiver or some other positions. So Molden, I love. If they brought him in, he'd be a great special teamer. He'd be a pretty good depth guy, but they'd have to be careful how they use him. And I use him as an example here because there's a lot of guys at this position group that are an awful lot like him in terms of the compromises you'll have to decide that you can live with.
You know, when it does come to this group, are these guys, and kind of just overall looking at this draft, it sounds like a little bit of the opportunities are later. Are they players you can expect to come in and have an impact right away, or do they become more developmental?
You know, position group is interesting when you talk about that. Corner is tough. Jimmy Moreland came in and they were able to put him in situations that he was able to excel right off the bat, make plays, but they also protected him a fair amount, because corner is a position that there's a big learning curve. Receiver, same way. It's very difficult for a rookie receiver to come in and do what Terry McLaurin did for Washington when his rookie year happened. He just came in like he was already an 8-year veteran, but that's a very rare thing. Offensive linemen tend to be able to do a little bit more, a little bit faster. Running backs, same way. But it just really depends on the position group. But as we talk about this position group, you know, if Washington, they've addressed enough of their needs in free agency that they don't need to reach for a position player. For example, because they've got Darryl Roberts at corner, they can also play some safety. Cam Curl could go from strong safety back to free safety and put Landon Collins up front. These are things that they can do, some of it addressed with free agency and some with previous drafts. So they don't have to reach for a guy that they might have to compromise on and then plug him in before he's ready to go. And what ends up happening with some teams is they take the position of need and they draft the best player available at this spot for that position of need. And that's a mistake, because if there are players that are ranked higher on their board than that guy in that position, they end up populating their entire roster over the course of several years with a lower level of overall talent. It's one of the reasons that I absolutely love what Washington has done with free agency. It allows them to be more flexible to take the best player available in the draft. And in the secondary, bringing in William Jackson III and Darryl Roberts especially gives them that flexibility in the secondary to not have to reach.
I know that's exactly what they were hoping to do, take best player available. All the moves leading up to it should allow them to do that. Thank you so much, Trevor. We appreciate you joining and breaking down these position groups for us leading up to the draft.